Thank you for joining CU Bands and Fans podcast. Our podcast is brought to you by Homegrown KIO. Homegrown KIO is on Sunday nights at 7 p.m. It is a stellar show featuring the great songs that have come from bands originating in Champaign-Urbana. Listen at 107.9 on your FM dial, at 1079wkio.com, or ask Alexa to play WKIO. Hello, this is Terry with CU Bands and Fans, and this is our podcast, The Story Behind the Musician. I am here with my co-host, Zach Widdop, and our guest this evening is Jay Rosenstein. Hi, Jay. How are you?
I'm great. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
We're glad to have you. So, Jay, we were talking a little bit before the recording that you currently were a professor at the U of I here in Champaign, Illinois, and you have since retired, coming on a year?
Over a year. It's about a year and a half now.
Oh, a year and a half. And so what were you, can you want to talk a little bit about that, being a professor at the U of I?
I can if you want.
Yeah,
What
go
would you
ahead.
like to know?
Let's talk a little bit about that, and then we'll move into the music.
Okay. Well, I started I got hired full-time as a professor in the fall of 2000 in the Department of Journalism at the U of I. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I transferred to the Department of Media and Cinema Studies, which is in the same college. So it's just kind of like a lateral move. And I was a professor for 20 years. I actually got into it kind of late in life. I was almost 40 years old when I became a professor. So it's not as though that's the only thing I've ever done in my life for work.
That's impressive, though. Very impressive. So what did you do before that?
Well, a lot of things, but mostly I worked at the Supercomputer Center at U of I, producing and editing and creating videos. They had a video department. And so then I became a documentary filmmaker, and then that's how I entered into journalism, media, and cinema studies.
Okay, probably my favorite thing in the world besides music is documentaries. Uh, I love documentaries. I watch documentaries as much as I can. So how did you gain interest in that, or knowledge in documentaries, creating them and producing them and that kind of a thing?
Well, as far as the knowledge goes, I'm entirely self-taught. But there's actually a connection between documentary and my love of music, which is, I first got a job as a as a production assistant at WILL TV, the PBS station here, and
Yeah.
then I also worked in master control. And master control is kind of like a DJ, like a radio DJ who's never seen or heard. So you're the person behind the scenes switching the programs on and off, but you're not on the air ever. And so part of that job is you kind of have to sit there and monitor what's going on over the air in case there's a problem. You have to jump up and fix it. So I was sitting there and I was watching a lot of PBS because that was my job. And so that really fueled a lot of my interest in documentary. But the biggest thing for me for documentary was I love the fact that it combined two things that I love quite a bit, which is nonfiction storytelling and music. So documentary was a way of adding music and artistry to storytelling, like as opposed to being a newspaper journalist. It doesn't, I mean, there's an art to writing, obviously, but it doesn't have, that connection with music. So music was a big part of what interested me in documentary. I loved the idea of putting moving images together with music.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I definitely can. So I looked up a few of your documentaries. I think if you just key your name in, that comes up along with some of the old bands that you played in. Had you ever considered, or have you ever done a music documentary on a musician or about musicians in our area?
The answer is no. And what's funny is you talk about your love of documentary. My favorite documentaries are all music documentaries
Mine
myself.
too.
And one of the most influential documentaries that got me started, even way back when I was younger, was a film called Monterey Pop. And I don't know if you're familiar
Oh
with.
yeah,
Oh, Zach
yeah.
is. It's about the famous Monterey concert, 1967, where everybody knows the imagery of Jimi Hendrix lighting his guitar. That was that show. But there's a great film about it made by D.A. Pennebaker, who's kind of a legendary filmmaker, and that actually really was the first thing that kindled my interest in documentary. Um, because I loved the music of that time, and so I saw it when I was maybe a teenager, and I was born in 1960, so I wasn't that far removed from when it actually happened. But I
Yeah.
was really struck by how you could use documentary as like a form of time travel. It gave me like a chance to actually feel like I was there. And there's a famous part actually in that film. I don't know if Zach, you remember it, where there's a woman who's cleaning the chairs, and they ask her who she is and where she's from, and she says she's from Champaign, Illinois,
I
which
remember
is.
that. Yeah.
So
That's all.
actually, no, I haven't. The first film I made on my own by myself when I was learning was a film about the original Otis and the Elevators. There was an earlier version which was not famous like the later version. But that was like the first film I made at Cablevision. You remember the cable
Yeah,
TV?
I worked
Yeah.
at Cablevision.
And they'd let you use equipment. Back then, we didn't have these cameras in our pockets, and it was hard to get equipment. It was expensive, and people didn't have it. So through Cablevision, they let members of the community make TV shows. That was part of their agreement, and so that's where I first started. And I've been tempted many times over the years to do a couple of things specifically having to do with Champaign music, but it hasn't happened. So I don't know if it'll ever happen or not.
Well, that's something that's on my goals and my radar. I would love to do a documentary. And it could be just one musician, or I don't think I have what it takes to do like on the history of NCU, but I know there are some films out there about it. And but I would just love to do that. Like, so if you ever do decide to do that, I'd be an assist. I mean, I would
Okay.
I would love to get my hands on that and get involved. But you did a documentary on Otis and the Elevators?
The original. So Otis and the Elevators, there were sort of two versions. So that band began really in 1982, and so basically that band more or less was a trio. It was myself on guitar and Mark Zaire on bass, and the two of us were the two members of all the Otis and the Elevators from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And then the drummer was also a friend named John Decatur Smith. So that was the original band, and it lasted for about a year, till about 1983, and then I moved away for a year, and then I came back specifically because I wanted to play music again, and Mark, the bass player, was still living here, and so I knew, well, I could hook up with Mark, and it's not always easy to find good bass players, and Mark's a great bass player. I thought, okay, well, maybe we could, start a band again, and we just decided to keep the name. So then the second band was Mark and I, and Darius Hess was our original drummer, and Jim Burry was our guitar player. And that's the band that got pretty well known and was very popular, in Champaign-Urbana and Chicago.
And so did you play like I don't know, some of the places in back in that day was like Red Lion, and I don't know, there was a lot of places to play back then.
Well, our home was Mabel's. Mabel's
Yes.
was our home. The Red Lion was no longer there when we started. I think the Red Lion kind of pooped out in the very early 80s. So
Wow.
we were mostly very monogamous to Mabel's. Mabel's was our home. Um, the only there's a couple other places that we played, uh, but mostly we stuck to Mabel's. We had a great relationship with them. We were drawing huge crowds, which is fun. And of course, Mabel's was great because, it had a concert-sized stage, concert-sized PA, lights, so you didn't have to haul a PA. That was always a big thing.
Yeah,
Um,
especially up them stairs.
oh my God. Well, everybody's got stories about those freaking stairs, especially
Yeah.
the back stairs. They get all icy.
Mhm.
Every musician who ever played there, even national musicians, they all have stories about those stairs.
Yes.
I once, not, about a year ago or something, I went on campus with my youngest daughter. And as they've just, if you were here in the 80s, you wouldn't even recognize campus anymore. But,
Right.
they tore down a lot of the buildings that were back behind Mabel's, which that building still exists. But we were going around there, and I realized that, the alleyway to the back was still there. So I took my daughter, and I didn't realize the stairs were actually still there, the old Mabel stairs. That
No kidding.
yeah. So she shot a little video of me, and of course I'm just being a typical dad. Oh, this was over here, and you remember this, and blah 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 blah, blah, telling her stories and stuff. But I don't know if it's still there. But I guess it was a year or two ago. The stairs were still there, and I have some pictures of the stairs.
I'll have
Yeah.
to check that out. I had a friend in that time period who played keyboards in a band called Off-World Fusion around that time period, and I had a he didn't have a car, and I had a old Rambler classic station wagon, which had a lot of room in the back of it. So I used to drive his keyboards to Mabel's and would go into the back there and carry the keyboards
Oh
up that
man.
back stairs. And then the drummer asked if I could give him a ride too. And we put some of his drums in the back and some on the top of the car on the rack, the carrier rack. And we drive those up into the back there and carry all that stuff up the
Yeah.
stairs.
Zach,
You
I
never
love
want
it. I have
You never
never
want to be the guy with a van, because if you own a van, someone's going to
Yeah.
make you carry their equipment.
That's funny. That is I had never heard that story about you, Zach.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, Zach, you're part of the club. Just bring up those back stairs, on the Mabel's news group, and you'll get like a million comments by other people telling their stories about those stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to let everyone know, there is a group called Mabel's. So, if you've got any history or any stories or anything, join that group and share those. But are you in that group, Zach?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think I am.
I think we are, as CU bands and fans too. So Otis and the Elevators, you had two separate versions of that same band.
Yeah.
Was there a break in between?
Yeah. Like I said, I left here for a year. Um, that was when I graduated from college. In 1983, I left and worked at General Electric and then Motorola in Schaumburg, Illinois, and then moved back in about 84. And so 85 to 90 were the 5 years, the real 5 years of the Otis and the Elevators that everybody knows.
I think
And
you
what,
played out of town some too, didn't you?
Where?
Out of town? You had out of
Sure.
town
Yeah,
shows?
we did. Not particularly far though. We had regular gigs in Chicago, which went really well, and we play in Bloomington Normal sometimes at names escape me now, and we played in Carbondale. Um, excuse me. And that was mostly what we did. We played out of state a few times, but it wasn't very successful for us, and we decided it just wasn't worth it. So I know we played in Ann Arbor, we played in Bloomington, Indiana, but
what kind of music? What kind of music did you play? And was it your own music or?
Yeah, Otis and the Elevators was definitely an original band. I would, describe it as, across sort of indie classic rock was our sound and our influence. Um, I don't know, maybe that's the best way I could describe it. Back in those days, one thing that was really special about that time, especially with Mabel's, was that you could play original music and you could build up and you could become, like fairly successful just playing original music. And of course, we played some covers. But even now, when I go back and I look at some of the stuff we did or listen to old tapes or videos, I've recently been digitizing all my old videos. So I've been
Oh,
looking at,
good.
and so I was kind of amazed. I'd look at them like, wow, like we had a real, we probably had by the end 30, 40 original songs. I mean, we had like a real critical mass of our own material. But again, back then you could do that. Like Mabel's wasn't looking to book cover bands, although they did sometimes. But most of the bands that play there during that period were playing original music, and that was sort of expected both from you and from the audience, which I don't get the sense that there's as much interest in original music today as there was then.
As it
But
was then. Yeah. And that was gonna be one of my questions, but you kind of answered it in the beginning of your statements. But yeah, that because we went to Mabel's
oh, you
and
did.
oh yeah, and we would see the Elvis Brothers and just whoever was there. But yeah, Mabel's was definitely one of the best places to be. Um, and you just there's certain things you just remember about it, and you always will.
Absolutely.
But it was always a blast. It was always fun. But the original music, I mean, you made a very valid point. I don't know what the difference is now. I mean, we're continually building a platform for original music as CU bands fans because we think it's so important and crucial. And there are a ton of songwriters I mean, you just have to dig just a little deep, and you land upon tons of them, and a lot of them play cover bands,
Oh yeah.
but they do write their own music, and they do have a whole different platform of music. So who originated most of your music? Was it you or other band members, or did you all just work together to create a song? Or
Well, in Otis and the Elevators, originally, for the most part, I was the primary songwriter when the band that everyone knows formed. Mark, the bass player, and I had already written a few songs together, um, but most of us wrote independently. So I was at first the primary songwriter, and then as we went on, Jim Burry, the other guitar player and singer, he started writing songs, and so by the end of the band's time, both of us were writing songs. And like most bands, the primary writer who basically would come in with words and a melody. And in Jim's case, he was a great guitar player, so he usually had these really powerful guitar riffs that his songs were based around. And you throw them out to the band, and things get tossed around, and you know, each member kind of puts in something, and eventually, you kind of land on an arrangement and people work out their parts. Um, and, that's kind of how it works. But in that band, it was, by the end, it was Jim and I, as the two guitar player singers, were the people that were bringing in the songs.
I've always found that I find that so extraordinary. Um, the workings of that, how it works and how you come together and how everybody, does their part, and it just begins to blend, and it becomes a song. And
Well, can I just interrupt you? If you really want to see a great example of how that works, the new Beatles documentary, watch that because it shows them in the process of making the songs that were on Let It Be. And not every band works the way the Beatles did, but it's amazing to watch them doing it. McCartney would just start singing a thing, and then, Lennon would jump in, and these, and they, you just watch them make up out of thin air these songs that are so famous. These are like the greatest songs in the history of music. And it's fun to see them just sort of casually, just like, yeah, here's one. What about this? But if you want to see a great example of how that works, you have to watch that film.
I sure will. Yeah, thank you for that little tip there. I'll definitely do that. I think that I was watching something. I think it was with my sister. I'm not sure, but anyway, it might have been Fleetwood Mac and them making of the Rumors. It might have been that documentary, but anyway, when they just like come together and they do this, I'm like, musicians are mind-blowing. I mean, that gift and that talent and skill and relationships and communication and everything that all comes together into, and they create this song, which, or an album or whatever. It's so fascinating to me. Just musicians, I don't know if you guys realize what kind of a gift that is. Or because I mean, are musicians born or are they made? I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you, Mike, I have a point of view on that, really, and that, I think people are born with different levels of natural talent. Okay. So, like, you take someone, I just brought up Paul McCartney. I mean, Paul McCartney, has just an enormous amount of natural inborn talent. But on top of that, had an amazing work ethic. And so I think, even if you're not born with very much natural talent, you can work your way into, being pretty skilled. I'm someone who doesn't have much natural talent for guitar at all. And I'm not saying that because I want you to go, oh, no, Jay, you're really good. It's true. And I know that because it's always been harder for me to learn guitar than I see other people. If you have natural talent, you'll pick up the guitar and you'll learn faster than everybody else. Like, you'll all start here and all of a sudden one guy's up here, and that's the guy with the most natural talent. But that doesn't always end up being the best guy, because maybe it's someone who doesn't work very much and just kind of skates by on that. And meanwhile, you take someone like, for instance, Jimi Hendrix. His natural talent was here, but then he worked and worked and played constantly and played constantly. So it's a combination of the two, and everybody sort of starts at a different place and rises at a different rate. But even if you don't have a lot of natural talent, you can work to get somewhere. But in the end, the best, in the end, the best people are just great. They really are. You talk a lot about how, oh, so-and-so is just, it's all hype. You know what I mean? Or so-and-so, it's just a creation by the media or blah, blah, blah. But once you achieve a high level of success at music, the people who achieve that they're great. They really are.
I knew a guy here. I knew a guy in town here many years ago who was a phenomenal acoustic guitar player and singer and songwriter, but he had no drive.
Yeah.
He wasn't going anywhere, and he wasn't interested in going anywhere. He'd sit around with friends and play guitar and sing, and he would occasionally have a show at some place, but not very often. But the guy was amazing. If he had drive, I'm sure he would have really gone places.
Yeah, so that was a good point. A really, really excellent point, because it does take, you can't just be, you know what I mean? I mean, you maybe think you can on social media, I guess. Maybe that's tricked you into that concept of just put it out there. You don't have to really work at it. You don't have to, you just get your followers and it's all dreamland. But that's not the truth. The truth is, honestly, whatever you're doing, whatever your natural talent is, if you don't have a good work ethic and build on that, then it's for nothing. I mean, and you have to have the drive, or who, if you don't have the drive and you don't want the drive, that's fine too. I mean,
Yeah, right,
nothing wrong with that, but don't expect greatness
right.
if you're not willing to work towards greatness.
There's a couple things I want to mention about that. One is, for people who, like music, go hear music, but don't know much more about it. When you go see a band, any band, you're seeing the result of a lot of hard work just to get to that. Even a band that you think is just kind of mediocre, they've worked for a long time just to get there. Like a lot of work. And you're right. There's no shortcut to that. But I remember reading a book that said um, success in a creative field never comes by accident. You never just like fall into being, like a great musician or a great actor or a great, again, you might have natural talent that opens the door for you, but the people who sell a lot of records and the people who, they have worked and worked and worked and had that drive besides the musical gift. You're right. You have to have that drive you have to want to succeed and do all that work.
Yeah. And that was, I loved just that conversation right there. I think that I gleaned a lot out of that just in that few minutes, myself, because I agree with it so much. And I mean, that's like even being a photographer. You can
grab any kind of creative, yeah,
and go out and click, post them on Facebook, and and then get angry if people don't think that your work's so great, but you haven't really honed your skill. You have to hone your skill. And that being said, though, musicians are an incredible force on this earth, and they really deserve a lot of accolades. I think.
My daughter, my youngest daughter, has become a very big music fan, thanks to me, taking her to the Rose Bowl starting at age 15, because the Rose Bowl is a very family friendly place, especially when it's outside. I could bring my daughter to gigs but she was just at the Rose Bowl a couple nights ago, and there was a touring band playing, and she came home and she was really pissed because it was pretty crowded and there was a table of dudes right in front of her, and they were screaming the whole time at each other during the show. And her first words to me is like, "Dad, you would have been so pissed." And she's right, because to me, you go to hear music, you owe those performers some respect. If you want to, talk and hang out and socialize, that's fine. Go to the back. Don't sit in front of the bandstand and just be pretending like it's background music. Give the performers some respect. They've worked hard to get there,
Yeah.
and they deserve your respect. That's the way I look at it. And I do get pissed if I go to hear music and people are talking. Like, you want to socialize, go to the back of the room and hang out there, but don't make it harder for other people who want to hear the music to hear the music,
Or go to a sports bar. There's a lot of talk
exactly. Right, exactly.
Which brings me to another pet peeve that I have is when I go to see a band and hear a band, and there's a TV behind them and it's got sports and all that kind of stuff. Oh, stop it. Just turn the TV off.
That's what I agree. I say the same thing. Can you turn this TV off?
I
just think that's the rudest thing, but that's just my opinion.
I went to see one band play. I went to see one band play where they had the TVs on, and one of the guys in the band actually said, "Turn those TVs off." And he was at the point where he wasn't going to continue playing until he turned the TVs off.
Good for him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, it's either music or it's the TVs. It's not both.
Yeah, if you want to watch sports on TV, don't go to a place where a band's playing.
there's a
Or
lot.
again, stay in the back. It's fine. Like I don't mind if there's people who just came to socialize and they're in the back of the room and hanging out. That's fine. But don't be sitting in the front and then just like yelling at each other because other people, and of course the musicians, we're not really fond of that either when people are doing that to you.
I
Yeah.
remember one of the biggest faux pas that's ever happened, I think, was there was a band for a while called Jazz Sandwich, and
I remember that
somehow
name.
they got booked to play at the Rose Bowl on Super Bowl Sunday. So they had the
Well,
game on the TV, and I think they had the sound turned down, but they had the game on
Silverweed
TV.
played Silverweed played, I think, two Super Bowls in a row because when we started playing at the Rose Bowl, we had first Sunday of the month. And I think for the first 2 years, we played on Super Bowl Sunday. But they had the volume down. And quite frankly, nobody who was there really gave a shit about the Super Bowl. And the Rose Bowl only had one TV at the time, because it's never been a sports bar. But the TV is exactly opposite to the stage. So while I was playing, I could actually watch what was going on, but nobody else was watching but me.
I remember at this one, the band was watching the Super Bowl while they were playing, and I remember seeing most of the band members watching the screen while they were playing, so they were interested in it.
I
I think
just
they
don't
were
know
kind
why
of,
they would book a band on Super Bowl Sunday, or,
yeah,
I don't know why they would do that. Like I
I
would
don't
we
know
just,
how that happened.
we had actually the two Super Bowl Sundays we played were good gigs. There were people who just, they didn't care that much and they
hear
came
about
out
this.
to
Yeah,
hear the
yeah.
music. Yeah, because my first thought was, man, we should cancel this. Nobody's going to be there. The first time we did it, and it turned out okay. There's
There
so
are some people that they don't care about the Super Bowl. They don't
right.
care about that, so it gives them an out, and let's talk about Silverweed, which is your current band now. And you guys, you have a gig coming up this weekend, don't you?
Well, actually, it's tomorrow, but it'll be, I guess, today when you play this podcast. So
So it's
it's
Tuesday.
Tuesday the 17th, 7:30. So I think you're going to play this on Tuesday, right? So
Tomorrow.
that,
Yep, tomorrow
yeah.
at 5 p.m. we'll
Okay, so
probably.
tonight,
Oh,
Silverweed's playing tonight at the Rose Bowl. So if you're
at
watching
7.
this, come hear us, and yeah. So that's yes. So it's tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm doing. See, because Sean, um,
Our
he
drummer,
yeah, he was on one of our podcasts,
yeah.
and then he's going to be. I booked him again because when he was on our podcast previously, he talked about the jazz music and scene and the archiving of the music and that kind of thing, and it was super interesting. But this time we're going to talk about Silverweed and music, and what he's doing.
Great.
Yeah, he's
So
in other bands.
yeah.
Yeah.
But Silverweed, how did that come about?
Well, Silverweed for me, this isn't exactly the answer to your question, but Silverweed has been an enormous gift for me because it's given me the opportunity to kind of have a second act in music. When I hung it up with Otis and a few other things that I did, I was pretty certain I was never going to really be a performing musician again, and that part of my life was over. And so it's been wonderful to like get this second chance to do this thing, and play again and playing regularly and playing in front of people. But the way it came together is over the years, the original bass player in Silverweed was Jim Rowland, and Jim and I, we played on and off, once in a while, and we usually we'd sometimes get Jeff Magby, who's a drummer here, to sometimes play with us. We didn't play any shows or anything. And it was always in the back of my mind that, like, gosh, I wonder if I could ever do this again. I wonder if I could ever do this again. And then I had known Sean from way back when he was a teenager. I think I was already a college graduate, but he was a
Me
teenager.
too. Me too. We're
Okay.
both
And
radio
so
amateurs.
Sean's a huge deadhead. If you know Sean, He's a walking encyclopedia of Dead shows. You could just say, what was when did the Dead play this song? He'll tell you the show. He knows, like, right off the top of his head, he's got it all. He's a total just encyclopedia of it. And that's how I met him when he was younger, and I was into the Dead, and we traded tapes, but he was a teenager at the time. So anyways, I knew him. And then as Otis and the Elevators were playing, I think he was in some bands, and I knew him as a guy who I think played a little bit of rhythm guitar and played percussion. And then, he moved away. And anyways, I got a message from him, I guess it's probably in 2018. He said, "Hey, by the way, I'm moving back to town." And so, and I think he mentioned, "Oh, and I play drums." So I was like, "Oh, okay." And I remember I asked him, I'm like, "Are you any good?" And because, he goes, "Yeah, I'm good." Because I'd never seen him play drums. So I didn't know, is he just screwing around or is he really a drummer? So I said, "Okay, well, let's get together. Jim and I'll get together with you. We'll see what happens." I remember the day we were getting together with Sean, I told Jim, I said, "Look, I have no idea how this is going to be. It might be horrible for all I know. Like, I don't know if he can really play drums or not. I've never seen him play drums. So it could be horrible." And he shows up, and it's like by the second song, we're like, "Oh yeah, this is it. This is it. We have a band now." It just clicked like that. And so that's when it started. I guess it was about 2018 with Sean moving to town. And so the band started with Jim Rowland and I, and Jim on bass, me on guitar, and Sean on drums. And what we decided was we were just going to be a core, the three of us. And then because, and then we just bring in extra musicians, like gig by gig. Like, oh, let's have, and of course, the first on my list was always Jesse Brown. Let's have Jesse Brown play because he's in other bands, and so is everybody. So, it's like, well, nobody's going to be available all the time. So let's ask Jesse, maybe he'll sit in. And we got Jeff Kerr to sit in one time, who I knew from way back from playing in the Pranksters. And we got Bob Watson. So like each gig, we would like add a fourth person. But from the beginning, we were always, well, geez, if Jesse wants to keep playing with us. Oh, and Kurt Reeder. Sean brought in Kurt Reeder, who's like this great jazz organist, and he played a gig with us. And it's like, whoa, that was fun. Because Sean knows all the jazz musicians. So anyways, that's how it started. But, we were always like, well, we're just going to ask Jesse first. And if he can't do it, then we'll move on to someone else. And I even asked him to be in the band, and he said no. So he's not in the band. But the fact is, I don't think we book any gigs anymore unless Jesse can do it. So it's like, "Jesse, can you play this night?" And if he says yes, we book it. And if not, I think we forget about it. So he's not in the band, but he is in the band.
Yes.
But that's Jesse's personality too. If you know him, he's
Yeah.
So it's like, he said no, but we said, well, too bad, you're playing with us anyways. So that's sort of how it came together gradually like that, and so that's been the core. And then recently, as Sean has, Sean now plays in a jazz fusion band, which is one of his other favorite things. Like on one side, he loves the Grateful Dead and that kind of music, which is kind of what Silverweed is. We're not a Dead cover band per se, because we still play 4 or 5 of my songs, but we're a band that's kind of like influenced by that kind of music, that kind of.
And then he's in Spaceport.
Yeah, and he's in Spaceport, which is total jazz fusion, way out of my wheelhouse. But he loves that too. And so what he's been doing is he's actually been, the jazz guys that he gets along with really well and likes playing, he's been actually bringing them in. And he'd ask me, he's like, "Hey, what do you think about so-and-so sitting in?" I'm like, "Okay, let's give it a try." And the last gig, we had Jesse Brown and Kurt Reeder on keyboards. And then we had this kid who I love now, named Kyle Hunt, young guy, big young guy, always smiling, playing trombone. And he's amazing. Now, never in my life did I imagine that I would play with a trombone. Like, you know, I came up as a like folk music, folk singer, acoustic, and then, you know, again playing rock and roll, but in that realm, you know, like Bob Dylan, the band, Grateful Dead. You know what I mean? I'm still
Yeah,
anchored in
yeah,
that kind of, you know, and so like who would play with the trombone? But you know, we played a gig, uh, and it was a great time. We had a great time. So now, and then Kyle said, "Hey, anytime you guys want me to sit in, let me know." So we've been talking about, well, okay, you know, let's let him come up for some songs, you know, that songs that have more of a jam kind of, you know, thing to them. Let him come in, let him, because he can, you know, he can play on everything. Um, so the core of the band, it really is. It's not just, um, well, then I'm sorry, Jim Rowland got sick and eventually had to quit, which is too bad because we love Jim. But we were so lucky that John Tubbs, who's also a well-known musician in this area, someone I had wanted to play with for years, you know, we asked him to fill in a gig with us. He said, sure. And, you know, everybody, Sean and I said, God, if we can get, if he wants to play with us, let's keep him. And so he's now in the group, and Jesse really is part of our core now. So it's the four of us. But Jesse's not in the band. So just
Yeah,
yeah.
keep
So
that in mind.
he
yeah,
plays with you even if
So
he's
so
not
that's it. So we play, you know, a mix of, you know, kind of that Grateful Dead, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, you know, that form of music with some, you know, some kind of country-ish feel to it, some of it folk feel to of it, some of it reggae feel to of it, which I love. I
yeah,
love reggae music. You know, I don't pretend like I'm a Jamaican from Trenchtown. You know, I know who I am, but I love the music. I love that rhythm. It's just, it's always been a natural rhythm for me. And so I've written songs with that rhythm. Again, I'm not pretending to be anyone but me playing with that kind of backbeat. And it turns out Sean is really great at playing that, and Jim is really great at playing it. And so we, you know, we play a mix of, um, now we're up to, I think, five of my original songs, and then, you know, we keep swapping the covers of, you know, coming from that kind of
yeah,
place. And
By the way,
you know, and it's been great because, you know, I was afraid, you know, I didn't have kids till late in life. You know, my first daughter was born when I was almost 40. Um, and so I kind of, you know, regretted. I thought, oh, it's too bad. You know, my daughters are never going to know about their dad when he was a musician. It's just going to be that old stuff. And so it's been great to then be able to share it in the present, you know, with my kids who immediately started going to our gigs um, at the Rose Bowl, you know, and so they've gotten to kind of share. I've gotten to share that part of me with my kids, and that's a great gift. That's part of the gift
yeah.
that I've.
It really honestly is, and I think that you realize the value of that and what it means.
It's been really
That's
special. It really has.
yeah, and to have that when you mention to have that second wind or second chance, that's huge. That's huge. And it's very cool that you get to get back out there and do this music that's so uh desirable. I mean, people are looking, even though, you know, the taste for original music's not as big as it once was. There is a taste for it. There's definitely a taste for uh gifted musicians and a band that comes together, like you just said, or has people come up and be a part of it. I love that about this band. I loved
Thank you. Thank
everything
you.
that you said about this band. That is, I can't wait. I hope that tonight I would be able to be there, if it's even for just a little while, but to be
Yeah.
able to be there and experience that. Um, and then, so that this brings me to this. I don't think I asked you this. I'm not sure that you answered it, but why did Otis and the Elevators um, discontinue or dissipate or whatever? What happened
Well,
to bring?
yeah. What happened was, we we were on our third drummer. So Mark and Jim and I, the three of us we were the core through those 5 years. Our first drummer, Darius Hess, was a student at U of I when he first started with us. And then after he graduated, he decided, to move on. And we wanted to keep the band going. And so for a time, we started playing with Mouse Bruner, Mark Mouse Bruner, who very, very sadly passed away about a year ago. And to be honest, I'm still kind of devastated by it because he was an amazing guy. He played he started playing in a band called Bantuku. Oscar Soleil, who is this African guy, and Bantuku, and they were like almost like a house band at Nature's Table when, and you want to know the history of Nature's Table.
I vaguely remember them, yeah.
Talk to Sean. Sean knows the whole history.
Yeah, he's
but and so then they started a band called the Modern Humans, which was a really good band toward sort of the tail end of the Otis and the Elevators time, and then they went on their way. And this is an aside, but some of the guys from that band still play and are very well-known musicians in Chicago today. Chris Neville and Kurt Morrison. They formed a band in Chicago called Tributosaurus. And they got into this early on, where each gig they take an identity of a band and play that band's music. Like, so they advertise it that like that. Today, Tributosaurus is Tom Petty and stuff like that, but they draw huge crowds.
That's
Anyways,
a fantastic idea.
yeah. So then Mouse played with us for a while he was in the other band, and we were looking for a replacement, and we found Jono Peltz, who had been playing with The Outnumbered, which was a kind of indie-ish punk band that got signed to Homestead Records, which is a national label, and had some success with that. So then we played with Jono, and things were good. And then Jono was about to get married. He was getting married and leaving town. So it was like, okay, are we going to look for another drummer, like our fourth drummer after 5 years? And I didn't want to do it anymore. So I basically quit at that point. I mean, Jono moved, and I think the other guys would have stayed together. And I said, no, I've had it for a couple reasons. I had gotten tired of playing loud rock and roll because I don't have a loud voice. And, anyways, that was part of it. And the others, like, I couldn't imagine, like, oh, we're going to get another drummer and we're going to have to go through all that old material to teach him again after we've done it two other times. And so I quit. Now, Jim and Mark went on to form a very successful band right after Otis called Organic Advisor, which played at Mabel's and kind of picked up where Otis left off, and did very well. So, I was tired of playing loud music. That was part one, and part two is, I couldn't fathom going through the process of, teaching another drummer. So it's a combination of things, and I was ready to maybe move into somewhere else, a different phase of my life.
And how old were you at this point?
I was 30.
Okay.
So, the last Otis and the Elevators Mabel show was on the eve of my 30th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of interesting. And so actually, 10 years ago, we did a reunion for the one and only time in Chicago. And it was Jono and it was Jono, Jim, me, Mark Toupee, and then Mouse sat in on a song. And it was in Chicago, and that was so much fun. Like, all the old faces were there. My current wife, who's, lives in New York, she'd never heard the band. So it was fun for her to see, like, all these people sitting there singing along to these original songs. And I'd still like to do it again while we're all still standing, barely.
Yeah.
I just heard from Jim. Jim, he can't play a wah-wah pedal anymore because I think his hips are so messed up.
Yeah.
It gets a lot harder when you get older, Terry.
Yeah. Age
I don't
is,
know like I actually have to, like work to keep doing it. It's a lot harder at my age than it was, but I would love to do another Otis reunion. I it holds, at the time we were doing it, there was friction like there is in a lot of bands.
sure.
A lot of bands that for bands that are really trying to like move up the ladder and really achieve, like bands that want, like we want to try to make it, who work. It wasn't just let's just live in Champaign and play once in a while. We were really trying to build a career. And so, there happens to be friction comes in. You're a bunch of young guys, none of whom know how to communicate because,
Right. Because you're
people
young.
our age, Zach will tell you, men our age, we don't know how to talk to each other. Your only emotion is you get mad. That's all you got. And so there's friction and all that. But then, now when I look back on it, and I'll tell you, this just happened because I was digitizing all this material, for the, pulling out videos that I'd never seen before. And I remember I pulled out a mini disc recording. Remember mini discs?
Mhm. Yeah.
That was going to be a big audio format that didn't catch on. I had a mini disc of Otis and the Elevators. Where did this come from? Because mini discs weren't even invented when we were playing. So obviously it's a dub from something. And I'm like, so I found a mini disc player and I just put it in. I didn't even know what it was. And it was us at Mabel's sometime. And I'm like, wow, we're really good. Because I was able to hear us in the way that the audience hears us, like
Yes.
without any of the internal baggage. I was just hearing the music and I'm like, damn, like we were really good. And I'm not one to brag ever. I don't, I always think I suck all the time. And it was like, wow, it was a revelation to me. Like,
We
wow,
really were
we're
good.
really a good band. And so, so now, my relationships with the guys, it's all just like, oh, that was, so great. And they're your brothers, for better or worse. They're
Life
your brothers, and nobody can take away that part of your relationship, and you have that history that no one else has, and you're bound by that history for the rest of your lives.
forever.
And as you get older, I think you appreciate it more and more. And
Yes.
I've learned to love those guys because of this history that we have and I don't have with anybody else.
Yeah. And you never will. Like it's them
Right.
and that's it. Um,
Yeah.
did you
They're my
say
brothers.
you recorded?
Otis, yeah. Otis, we released 2 albums of original music and a live cassette during our time.
A live cassette. I would where can we now? I know Homegrown KIO has played Otis and the Elevators. Matter of fact, I think they just I want to say 2 Sundays ago, they did a whole thing on Otis and the Elevators. And that's L.A. Fredrickson and David Leake who host that. And they
Not
played,
that I'm aware.
yeah, they play every Sunday night at 7 o'clock. And it's music that was recorded in Champaign-Urbana from musicians that originated from Champaign-Urbana. So like REO, I know they just did a thing on Otis and the Elevators. It's been,
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's pretty fresh. I don't know if you're in that group. We have a group, listeners to Homegrown KIO. There's a lot of people in there, and so we kind of just like have these conversations during that show on Sundays from 7 to 8, and they go when they start at 7 and they end at 8, and it's the fastest hour ever. But the music is outstanding. And I know because when I searched Otis and the Elevators, I came upon a whole list of songs that were recorded, I believe, at Mabel's. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, we had a friend of ours named Jeff Appleby, who is actually now the guitar tech at Guitar Center.
He's also in Doc Shred and the Hearts.
Oh, right. That's right. I forgot. Thank you.
Yeah.
So he used to record all our Mabel shows on cassette, and then out of the woodwork, this is just what happens over the years. A guy sort of appeared who was the brother of an ex-roommate of our guitar player, and he suddenly was really interested in Otis and the Elevators, and he asked for tapes, and I started sending him tapes. And then this is in the earlier days of CD, and he would take those live tapes and he would turn them into CDs. And his wife was a graphic designer, and so for some of them, she'd actually make packaging for them. And so I loved it because I have all these cassettes, but they're all sitting in a plastic tub. I'm not going to go back and listen to them all, but he would like make them into CDs. He would band them, with all the songs, put the song names on it, and then send me back this wonderful CD package, fully produced. And I'm like, great. Awesome. And then he started borrowing some tapes from Jeff too. And so a lot of that stuff now is up on the Internet Archive, that site called the Internet Archive. And he asked permission. He said, do you mind if I put this up? And I'm like, sure, whatever. So there is a bunch of it up on that Internet Archive. And that's where I think you'll find a bunch of Mabel shows are up there.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. But just want to put this in there. So I love albums, vinyl, CDs, tangible music. I love tangible music so much more than digital. Of course, we have to go digital, we have to download digital, we have to buy digital, all of that. But as many tangible music that I can get a hold of, I prefer. And recently I got a van that, believe it or not, has a cassette player. So I am going even further back. Thankfully, I had 3 cassettes. One is REO, you can tune a piano, but you can't tune a fish. One is Elton John, Yellow Brick Road, and one is a worship cassette. So I put in the REO. I'm like, I hope this works. I hope this works. I hope this works. I put the REO in, and it works, and it sounds beautiful. So I did a little video and put it up on her page. I was like, I'm going way back old school. Now I'm looking for cassettes. I've got REO and I've got Elton John, and Bruce from REO liked the post.
Oh, great.
It was pretty, but I don't mind going old school. It doesn't bother me. I enjoy it because I just feel like, something could happen like internet wise and things go down and you can't get to your Spotify or whatever. I don't care. I've got my cassette player. I've got cassettes. What do I care?
You must have bought an old van.
I did. New tires, battery, the whole thing. Yeah. Heck yeah. It works.
Great.
I would prefer a station wagon. Honestly, I was kind of jealous of that story. But anyway, okay, so back to this. But you guys, did you record an actual album or CD or cassette? You recorded
2 albums.
Okay, and were they both on cassette?
No, neither of those were. Those were. Oh wait, the second one also came out on cassette. Yeah, so those are 2 albums done in kind of studio situation. The first one was actually recorded in my living room on borrowed equipment, and then mixed by Willie Wells, who was a guy who, if from the early Mabel's days, was a well-known guy. And then the second album was recorded entirely in studios. So the second album we released on album and cassette. The first album was just vinyl album. And then between those 2, we put out a live cassette, which was a compilation of various live cuts that we kind of picked out from our all our tapes and live shows. So there were two commercially available cassettes.
I love that. Have you
But
considered?
we never put out a CD. That the second album came out right on the cusp of when CDs were beginning. So the only commercially available CD Otis and the Elevators is the record service 20th anniversary. They put out a CD. I'm sure they have it at the radio. KIO must play from that.
Yeah.
Record service put that out, and we had one song on there. And so that's like the only commercially available CD thing that we ever did.
Had you ever considered recirculating that?
I have, I have digital copies of the albums, but I didn't digitize them. And I know there's a pitch problem with at least one of them. Um, have I thought about it? Sorta, yes, sorta, no. Um, maybe I will. I mean, I can, maybe I will. I mean, I would never, I'd put it up on the internet, I wouldn't try to sell it or anything, but, and I think there's bits of it out there anyways, like you said. I mean, sometimes I hear from people that say, oh, I saw this, thing of you. And I go look at it and I'm like, I don't even know what it is. I don't know where it came from. That's the story of the internet.
Yeah.
And sometimes our record comes up for sale, like on eBay and stuff like that, and I always get a kick out of it. Just like, wow, $12.
Yeah, I was going to read you what some of the because there's this Otis and the Elevators, Some Career.
That was our first album, yeah.
Okay, and it looks like you guys on the cover.
Yeah, it was us. I had hair back then.
I can't tell which one was you. I cannot tell which one. I cannot even
I have
tell.
the jean jacket. I'm wearing the jean jacket and I'm sitting down.
With glasses.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of has that picture kind of has a Friday Night Live vibe to it.
That was the attic in the house that Mark and I were living in at 407 and a half West White, which it's been torn down for apartments. And we used to practice up in that attic.
I am going to so first of all, I'm going to probably see if I can get that album, get a screenshot of that or something and add that onto this podcast. And it looks like somebody called Luke Pack, LUKPAC, is who posted this. Because I was going to share some of the comments with you. I'll just send you the link because there's a few comments. It was just like a year ago that said, "Oh, I wish I could get that cassette, the one that you were just speaking of. I wish I could get that live cassette." So yeah, I'll send you that. I'll send you that link, and then you can check the comments and stuff like that. And it seems like people are still very interested and hearing from you guys, and it takes them.
I've been since I went through the videos, I've been gradually putting some videos up on the internet. Right now, I'm kind of between houses right now, so all that stuff is packed, and so when I finally get settled and all that stuff is unloaded, then then maybe I'll start doing things more seriously. Because as I was discovering these videos, again, I was like, first of all, I was amazed at the stuff that existed that I didn't realize that I had, in my basement. Like, wow, I didn't know, there was a tape of this. The funniest thing is, I'll tell you, in both live audio recordings and video recordings, is you hear songs that you forgot about, and songs that I wrote, and that we played for a while, and some songs kind of stick and become part of your sort of permanent rotation, like certain songs, like there are certain songs that you play all the time, and they're sort of like your hits. And then some songs, you bring out, you play them a couple times, they don't quite gel or whatever, and they just kind of get forgotten. And it's fun when one of those come up, it's like, what is this song? And then you go, oh, wait a minute. I wrote this song. Like, I don't remember it at all.
What is, do you have a favorite that you wrote do you have a favorite?
Well, our hit, we had two hits that I would call, and when I say that, that got pretty heavy airplay on WPGU at the time. And one of them is still a favorite. It's called Dominate, and it's a song that I'm still playing with
Do that
Silverweed.
once in a while, yeah.
And yeah, it's fun. I mean, my own favorite kind of changes through the years, but that's been a consistent song in my life. And then we're playing another Otis song now called "The President Stumbled," which actually is going over really well, and in a way, doesn't sound dated in any way, which is kind of interesting. But you'd hear it and you wouldn't know that it wasn't just written recently. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of got a folk basis to it. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, I've pulled out some of that stuff to play in Silverweed just because I got these songs and I'd like to keep singing them. So what the hell,
I think that's great. I think that's really, really great. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing Silverweed. And is that your the only band that you're in right now?
Well, no, I started playing acoustically with a band that I've named the Woke Mountain Boys, with John Tubbs playing upright bass, and we've had two gigs, and we're playing again on the February 4th, which is a Saturday night at the Rose Bowl, as part of the Champaign-Urbana Folk and Roots
Art festival or folk and roots.
yeah. So they're kind of doing a weekend that weekend. I don't know. I'm not sure if there are any out of town bands playing or not. I'm not really sure, but I was really excited and still am to have gotten on that bill because I really wanted to play that, and so yeah. So we're going to do that, and that kind of started with there's this show that goes on every year in Springfield, and it's a Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead birthday celebration.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You've known about it? I've never known about it. It happens in September, which is not his birthday. Well, it's close, I guess, whatever. And they've been doing it for like 20 years. And so one of the guys who organizes it was a big Otis and the Elevators fan. And he hits me up, says, hey, does Otis and the Elevators want to play this year? And I'm like, well, I don't, no, I don't think that's going to happen. He's like, well, how about Silverweed? And, he contacted me like a year in advance. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I said yes, and then forgot about it. And then it's like a week before, and Bill's like, okay, so, is there anything you need for the show this weekend? And I'm like, uh-oh, I completely forgot. So I asked the other guys in the band, and again, I didn't know even what this thing was. I'm like, hey, do you want to go play in Springfield for no money at this thing that I don't even know if anybody goes to it or not? And so Jeffy and Sean said, no, thanks. And so I thought, well, all right, I'll go play by myself because I don't want to, like I said, yes, I don't want to let him down. And then John Tubbs said, yeah, I'll do it with you. And I'm like, okay, great. So, we put together an acoustic set of the two of us, and we went and did it. And this thing was, the whole festival thing was so much fun. It's this huge thing. And there's this huge pavilion in Springfield owned by the Park District, like a real pavilion, like an outdoor concert pavilion. And you can rent it, for like a couple $100. And then they had like a full PA concert, they had everything. And we pull up and I'm like, damn, like this is real. This isn't, I didn't know if it was just some guys in the basement, right? I mean, Zach, you said you've gone to it. It's in the park, and there's food stands, and there's people selling stuff. and I just had the best time. And I was like, man, I will play this every year if you want. So now Silverweed's booked for next year, and everybody knows about it. And
It's on
I think
board.
we're gonna do it this time. But that's how the acoustic thing started with John and I, because we did it and we're like, it's pretty cool. I'd like to keep doing this if we can.
So where else would you like to play? Because you mentioned the Rose Bowl a lot. Do you guys play anywhere else in Champaign?
Well, I'd like to play Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be my first choice.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't know. Are we going to play anywhere else? We played. We played in the park for Urbana Park District over the summer. We played a few other things. We're going to play at Cranard. They have the
Ooh,
Cranard has those like indoor things in the lobby. Where
yes.
people just and I think we're going to play one of those. And Sean has actually put in for us to play at the Illinois State Fair. Obviously not like a headline or anything, but
Yeah, but I have
something
one of
that
those
goes
stages.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have like 10 stages there.
Yeah.
They have a lot of local.
Yeah. So I can't say that I'm really actively searching for, we have a monthly gig at the Rose Bowl. Our night now is the third Tuesday of every month is Silverweed night, except for February. We got bumped because there's a special occasion going on. So we got our monthly thing at the Rose Bowl, and if things come up, if people can do them, we'll do them. I'm not really actively searching out much of anything else,
Just
to be honest.
enjoying this.
But yeah, I mean, I love the Rose Bowl. Just the vibe there, the people, and that's no offense to other bars and stuff. Like, just, they booked us right when it got sold to Charlie Harris, and I forgot who his partner is.
Gaccio Bandito.
That's right. And so they bought it right when they bought it. They gave us this regular Sunday night gig, and so again, it's kind of like Mabel's. I feel a certain loyalty because they gave us a chance to play, and actually, since we started, the club has grown tremendously. Now it's like there's 3 bands every night, and when we started, it was like start when you want, end what you want. We don't care, But now it's like you're on at 7, but that's okay.
Remember when back in our day, and when you were playing, and I was just going to hear live music. Remember when there was house bands?
Oh yeah,
yeah, and this is kind of like what you're saying now is somewhat of the similar concept. And there's something to be said about that, because like you said, it's beginning, it builds because people know you're going to be there. They know where you're going to be, and they know you're going to be there at that third Tuesday. And
you try to build it right. You try to build an audience up, and hopefully it becomes a thing that people regularly say, hey, this is fun. Let's go.
And I think that's kind of smart on venues' parts. They don't do it anymore, but I think it's kind of a smart kind of a way to book bands. But venues, they struggle, with this and that, and
I mean,
nobody's getting
rich.
Yeah,
Nobody's getting, nobody at the Rose Bowl is getting rich off of, including the owners. They're not raking in the do re mi, but they, I know Charlie. I don't know the other owner, but Charlie's a musician, and I think his vision for Rose Bowl was that it would be kind of a community place that would encourage music, that was music centered, and would encourage musicians, and that would would be a place that really catered to musicians. And so he's and it's become like, again, it feels like almost like a community center in a way, you know, part of the reason is because it's almost always no cover, you know. So they only charge cover charge, I think, for, you know, really big bands.
Mhm.
And, you know, obviously the bands don't make a ton of money, but you know, by doing that, it makes it just easier for people to just come in and, well, let's check this out. Um, and so especially when they're outside in the summer, to me, it's almost, that's almost like a
That's
park.
the
You know what I
best.
mean? Like their parking lot is like a park. And it's like, oh, let's go over to the park and there's some music playing, and,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think
we'll check
that,
it out, and we'll have a drink and we'll hang out, see some friends, and I
I
can
think we have to work that out
bring your
every
kids,
city.
you know, kids can come.
Yeah, no,
It's
that's what I that's what I like the most about that is because young people need to be more exposed to live music, I think, honestly, because I don't think that it's going to trigger anything in them if they don't experience live music, if they're constantly getting the digital audio and not seeing the actual musicians and the atmosphere and the people dancing and just the whole human interaction that goes on with music. I think that's so freaking important. I can't tell you how important I think that is, especially for young people. And so I love that during, you know, in the tent or whatever you can have it, whatever age. And that's why we're bringing back original artist night. We're going to do
nice,
it outside at
nice.
a venue. It's actually in Villa Grove. Um, because they have what's called the plaza. It's an outside area, very, very nice between two buildings, gated, stage lit, everything. And I want to be able for young people to be able to be there and experience that.
That's great.
And, yeah, and experience original music and just the whole experience of live music, period. That's important. Like your daughter, you know, your daughter, had she not had the opportunity to see you play live, thank God you got another opportunity to do that at while she's the age she is, and now she loves it, you know.
The jury's still out about whether I think it's a good thing or not. I keep I've told her since she was a kid, don't ever date a musician. So I'm not sure
Oh, you
if
should
what's
have
gonna
done
happen.
that. That's
Like no
fun.
musician.
Well, this has been, we should probably close. It's been an hour. I keep wanting to make these shorter, but it's just impossible because the conversations are just so amazing. But we should probably close this up, and definitely we will. Hopefully, are you going to be there tomorrow, tonight, Zach, Tuesday to see?
Maybe, I don't know yet. I hope so.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to make it a
Zach,
point.
Zach's a man about town. You never know where you're gonna find Zach on any
He
given
really
night.
is. He blew me away at New Year's Eve because I ended up spending New Year's Eve with my grandbabies, and which was wonderful. And then Zach's like, you know, he went to 12 places. I'm like, okay, Zach, you've not ever done that. So, but the pictures were fantastic, and I loved seeing you posting pictures again,
Yeah, me
and
too.
just seeing photos on our page again of that. And it brought a lot of engagement, and people were looking at them, and it was great. It was really, you did a fantastic job on those pictures too. So,
Thanks.
so yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you and getting to know
It's been
you.
fun. Thank you.
And this will publish tomorrow, but hang in there when we get done recording, because we always like to do a little selfie. And it's been fantastic talking with you.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for the invite. It's been a lot of fun.
And I will add links to where people can hear Silverweed and Otis and the Elevators, both. All right, we'll add links to pages and all of that.
Yeah, we have Facebook pages.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Hang on.